Ife joins us from Abuja studio now. He's a development economist and public policy strategist. Professor Ken, good morning. So we look at the numbers and we saw year on year, food inflation has gone up more than 13%. That's a whole lot. No wonder we're feeling the squeeze, and yet there's the opinion that this is not even capturing the real thing because our basket has not been updated for many, many years.
Right, it's not a good news. It's not a good news at all. And if you look at the relationship between the figures month on month and also year on year, you see a significant shift. For example, if you look at the month on month for headline inflation and then look at the year, you saw about 7%, or nearly 10%. But when you look, that's 9.70%. But if you look at the same situation for food, it's about 13%. It's a lot more. The jump is quite significant. And then if you look at the food, also month on month, again from 29 is quite heavy. You look at that, it's about 8%. So that has a lot of implications for however we think we are going to tackle this inflation. And I have to tell you something. There are 4 major things to look at when you start unpacking all these figures. Of course, I know we can come back and look at measures that we can take, but we need to understand the 4 different things at play. One is if we have demand pull inflation, domestic demand pull inflation, if we have domestic demand pull inflation, then, which is not the case, then the monetary policy will deal with that because you can suppress that demand by hiking the rates, the MPR rates, the policy rates, and then all other rates. But that doesn't seem to be the case. What we have is more of a structural supply push inflation. Now, this you can see manifesting itself in various prices of inputs going up, the petrol, the diesel, and all of that, and the power, energy. So these things are only amenable to fiscal policy, not to monetary policy. Then number 3, if we have imported inflation, which is arising from an import-dependent economy, and there's an inflation pass-through straight to the consumer because there's no price regulation mechanism, then monetary policy can affect that by moderating the interest with the exchange rates so that the rates at which these things are purchased and brought in is attenuated by manipulating the forex rates to that extent. But remember that when you look at the difference between food inflation sub-index and headline inflation, even though there's a distance, substantial distance of our 7%, there is a component that is common to 2 of them, which is imported processed food. Processed food is in both of them. So if you want to take them out, you have to look at how monetary policy can affect exchange rate. Then we move to the 4th one. The 4th one is domestic demand pull inflation, which we said is not the case. But there is a foreign cost demand pull inflation, which is caused by, and I want you to listen carefully to this, this is caused by the 100 million Francophone citizens surrounding Nigeria that are importing because of the price differential. They have a low interest inflation rate of about 2% on the average. They have a constant currency price fixed because they are linked to euro. And the French government is burning 80% of their reserves to maintain that value of that currency. It's an artificial value. And that's been going on for over 10 years. You have them fixed. Now, what it means is that About 9 years ago, 8 years ago, 1 naira was buying 3 francs CFA, which is fixed. Today, because of our devaluations and all of that, we can only buy 0.8, 0.7, 0.8. We can't even buy 1 CFA. So if you're looking at them getting our food from our country, our money is devalued about 80%. So there's a demand pool because it is very cheap now, very cheap export from Nigeria of our primary produce. But can monetary policy help there? It can. They are not bringing in dollar. They are not paying that food for dollar. They are using Nigerian naira, which is where the problem lies. 2, we need to, if we begin to ask maybe what can we do, then you can't stop that because of ECOWAS treaty, but you can insist that documentation is raised on those primary goods going out, and you can insist that they should be paid in dollar so that you can have it show up our dollar supply. But other than that, the major strategy that you should use is value addition. If we have value addition at the frontiers, then they are obliged to pay tax. Because if they say they don't want to pay tax, then they have to register with ECOWAS Trade Liberation Scheme, which is ETLS. That is what will give them that exemption, and they have to prove rules of origin. We have to comply with rule of origin. So that is another complex, but it is very helpful for us because if we add value, which you can do, one simplest way of doing that is to get the marketing board to be mopping up all the produce and then now control where that produce is sent. You can now send that to the processors who will process. If you leave it to the farmers, they won't be able to, they'll take it away. All this will go away because traders are going to come to them and collect all this and they move them across the border. So we'll monitor with fiscal policy, it's only fiscal policy that can help there. Will monetary policy help on that side? It's difficult, very, very difficult.
Prof,
and that's why food supply sub-index remains at very, very high level.
So, Prof, I guess that is why last week we did see the CBN do some kind of intervention, even after the governor showed a huge determination that he was not going to get into the intervention space because of the harm it may have caused to the economy before now. But we did see the CBN give some, I think they gave some grains and then they gave fertilizer, I beg your pardon, and some money and all of that because if they are to hit that target, since the CBN is using inflation target now of 21.4% this year, there's no way the monetary policy alone can bring that to pass.
Well, controlling money supply is essential. I haven't said anything wrong with that. It is essential because in the end of the day, the capacity of people to buy is what you are going to control with money supply. So that has effect. It's going to have effect without a doubt. And then also remember, if you add value to the produce, it actually helps you to moderate the imported materials, the imported food, because you are now bringing a substitute to enable you enforce restriction on imported food. But if you don't have the substitute, you can't stop people from smuggling the food. They'll be smuggling them into the country. So we cannot escape adding value because it is a strategy that helps us to deal with the cross-border challenge. Because once you process, then the cross-border trade will go up and start demanding dollar and start inflicting taxes and then do restrictions. All of that can happen at the level of value addition. And then if you come to our external import, obviously, when you have a substitute product, then the policy will be very effective in making sure that you can cut back on imported food. Because that imported processed food goes not only on the food sub-basket index, but even at the core inflation level. It is in there, in the core inflation. And if you look at the core inflation, which is coming in at 25.13%, it tells you that the first step is to move from, if you wanted to actually bring the whole inflation down, you have to look at how quickly you are going to bring down 37.something%, which is the inflated food sub-basket index, bringing it down to 25, which is the core. Because here, the core inflation excludes those volatile items, which is food and the energy cost. Those are the two most volatile. So assuming that you are able to control all that, you will be targeting 25.13%, which is the core inflation. So, and then when you now hit the core inflation, you are now going to say, okay, how about rural inflation? Let's target that. So, we've got some work to do. It's not impossible, but we've got some work to do.
All right, Professor Ken, development economist and public policy strategist, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you.